Hi everyone, this is Steve at Brass Horse Business Ed, and in this video I want to talk to you about design thinking in small businesses. Now, you might want to grab something to jot some notes down with and things like that, maybe to be able to mull them over later and about how they apply to your specific context and your specific small business. Also, I'm going to put some links down below to some other helpful videos and some other helpful resources. There's a book I'm going to mention later. I'm going to put a link to that down below in the description. So be sure to check those links out. And as always, if this video was helpful to you, please give it a thumbs up and like it, subscribe, maybe hit that bell to be notified of future videos. And please leave a comment down below about how the video might have been helpful to you to make you think about your business differently, or about how you have applied these design thinking processes in your business, or maybe how you've seen them applied elsewhere. So without further ado, let's dive right in. All right, so what is design thinking? Design thinking has been around for a long time, actually since about the mid-50s, and it's had different names applied to it over the decades, but for the past couple of decades, it's gained popularity in corporations, with some corporations even assigning vice president level and C-suite level executives design and design thinking titles. Now, I like what Tim Brown uses as a definition for design thinking. He's the CEO of Ideation and kind of credited with sort of more modern popularization of design thinking. He said design thinking can be described as a discipline that uses the designer's sensibility and methods to match people's needs with what is technologically feasible and what a viable business strategy can convert into customer value and market opportunity. Now, there's a lot in that definition, but it comes down to about three key components: desirability, feasibility, and viability. Let's unpack those. So desirability means that this is human focused, and design thinking at its heart is completely human focused, customer focused, customer centric. Now, the question that I would have for you is this: how often do you meet together in your small business with others? And if you're a sole proprietor, just a lone ranger out there doing your job, how often do you meet with people? It could be a group of key customers, or it could be a group of other entrepreneurs, to talk about the customer experience in your business. How does the customer really experience interacting with your business, your services, your products, your website, your checkout process, all of those kinds of things? Do you have and have you built a culture of talking about your customer's experience and how the interaction between your customer and your business can truly be improved? So as I mentioned, desirability means that it is human focused on the desires of your customer. It emphasizes the customer's user experience, or UX. For example, if you're designing a brick and mortar location for your store, actual storefront, do you take the customer's perspective on how they experience it from the moment that they see the sign and turn off the road? Obviously, we're overlooking all of the marketing and sales experience and customer acquisition experience that got them to come looking for you in the first place. But let's just start with, from the time that they see your sign and interact with that sign on the road, can they read it? Does it mean something to them? What does it conjure up? What feelings does that sign conjure up for them? Is this an old, dated, aged business with a bunch of crap strewn about all over a dirty floor? Or is this a modern business with bright lights and modern style furniture? Or is it a homey business? What feelings does that sign inspire? And then once they turn into that parking lot, what do they see? What do they hear? What do they experience? What do they feel? By what do I feel? I mean this. Do they feel a bunch of potholes in the in the parking lot as they pull in? Does the asphalt look fresh? Are the lines clearly painted? Are all the parking bumpers, kind of freshened up, or are they all crumbling concrete with rebar sticking out, looking like it could probably poke a hole in your brand new expensive tires? All of those things, right? How do they experience the curb front? How do they experience the storefront when they see it? Can they see inside? Does it look brightly lit? Does it look safe? Does it look inviting? The lighting, the music, the smells, the flow of the space, carrying the things that they are selecting. How do they carry those, physically carry those around the store? Is it comfortable? Does it make sense? Is it too big for the store? Is the cart too big for the store? Does it cause a lot of the butt brush factor, which in post-pandemic business, big no-no there. What about the payment system? What about the packaging? All of those things come into play with desirability. And we're just talking about, at this point, storefront business. It emphasizes emotions. It emphasizes behaviors. It emphasizes how you are making people think, feel, and act differently. So at its heart in Tim Brown's definition of design thinking was desirability. Now, the second part of the definition emphasized feasibility. Is it technologically possible? Now, the good and the fun part of design is that it's only limited by the designer's imagination, right? Or by the design team's imagination. If it's the entrepreneur doing the thinking, then it's only limited by your imagination, which is phenomenal. It really lets you play in the playground of what ifs. But the drawback is that sometimes we're able to design on paper or design in our minds what isn't yet technologically feasible. However, far-reaching designs that are on the border of technologically feasible, that solve real problems for the customer, can also serve as inspiration to cause us to press forward toward development or use what we already have available to us technologically now to at least solve part of the problem. For example, today's electric cars and the integration of various related technologies solve some customer problems, while we're not yet at the point of development to solve many customer problems. We still have a ways to go with that, but we were able to use some of the things that are technologically feasible today to solve some transportation problems and emission problems and power problems and what's called range anxiety problems. Can we get far enough away that it's feasible to take a day's trip to grandma's house? The third component of Tim Brown's definition is viability, and that's economic viability. Can it be manufactured below our price to sell, below what the market values it at? So the cost to produce has to be less than what the market is willing to value the design of the product or service. Let's talk about some important characteristics of design thinking. First of all, please note that it's a fluid process. It's not a linear process in the traditional sense that we think of a set of steps. While we talk about 5 phases of design thinking or processes in design thinking, we don't mean that this is a linear step model of you do one, okay, now you're done with that, now you do the second, now you're done with that, now you do the third, and you're done with that. It's not really like baking a cake in that regard. It's a very fluid process. There's feedback loops to every step, so you may get to one and realize we were asking the wrong question. We were analyzing the wrong problem. We were focusing on the wrong solution, and we have to go back and learn more. So it's an iterative set of steps, but it's not particularly linear. It is fluid and meandering. Another thing about design thinking is it requires the suspension of our assumptions and our biases and our held beliefs about what the customer wants, about what's feasible, about what's possible for us to do. And it requires us to step back and say, you know what, we're going to assume that we don't know what the customer wants until we immerse ourselves into this problem and get the customer's perspective and understanding. We always, and it's true of every entrepreneur, we always think our baby is the prettiest in the bunch. But in reality, every baby has some issues that needs to be resolved that makes them unique, that makes them very special, that makes them very valuable. With our ideas, we need to back up and drop every assumption that we know exactly what the customer wants. I've been doing this a long time. Nobody knows the customer as well as I do. we need to be willing to step back and say, maybe I don't know the customer as well as I wish I did. And the only way to solve that is this design thinking process where we really immerse ourselves in their life and in their experience and in how they deal with and experience the problem we're trying to solve. And we watch and we listen and we observe and we write notes. So that moves on to the third characteristic of design thinking, and that is that it requires research, not necessarily surveys and numerical data that they can just bubble in 1 through 7. So it's not particularly useful to do these surveys where we ask them, how satisfied were you with your experience today? And they say, well, a 6 out of 10. Well, what does that mean? And what are you going to fix to make that a 10? You don't know that. So it's not necessarily surveys and numerical data. It's more ethnography, more anthropology. You're really kind of becoming a social scientist in observing your customer in detail. And lastly, it requires rapid iteration. So in other words, you're going to try some things and you're going to determine some new ideas and you're going to think of some things and you're going to test them, and then you're going to strip out the things that don't work and you're going to rethink it again. Sometimes you're even going to go all the way back and ask yourself, were we trying to solve the right problem? So it requires rapid iteration of these steps. You're doing some things and you're backing up, you're doing some other things and you're backing up, and you're striving toward solving the customer problem. Why is design thinking so important? Well, first of all, human input devices and technology have allowed humans to interact with problems in very new ways. In fact, we've learned a whole lot from this coronavirus pandemic that we've been in small business land, how customers really are willing to tolerate solutions to their problems and how they go about solving those problems in ways that before perhaps we had created systems that worked okay, and they solved problems for customers the way customers were kind of willing to interact with them at the time because it was, it was a tolerable existence. But this coronavirus pandemic has been such a disruptor in people's lives, they have found new ways to solve problems. So what we need to understand is that human interaction, human input devices, and technology have allowed a vast new array of problem solving at our fingertips. The second reason why design thinking is important is that now we have a new understanding of business disruption and the potential for business disruption. And we understand now how a business can be disrupted on a dime for reasons that we never caused, without any particular mistake on our part. Suddenly there can be a major disruption. Since we know about that, design thinking becomes a very useful tool to help us understand how customers want a problem solved in a more effective, more efficient, maybe even a more distanced way. So it becomes very useful to us as a tool to use now that we understand how easily the customer experience can be disrupted. Thirdly, social media has allowed for common sharing of problems and frustrations, and that helps with trend recognition. So we're able to wisely monitor trends on social media, things that people make fun of, even memes that they develop, and be aware of how they experience things. And we're also able to be aware of new technology that could maybe be applied in a different way to problems. So social media has really allowed us very rapidly to understand customer experience, understand customer problems, get feedback very, very quickly, and understand new technologies that allow us to solve problems in unique ways. The fourth reason why design thinking is so important is that a company that really pays attention to what customers really want and need. And these are companies that are paying attention to the 1-star, 2-star, 3-star responses, not just that they're getting, but that their competitors are getting, that their indirect competitors are getting, even that substitute product and services are getting, help them to understand what could make life better. And that company launches better brands and products, and it creates value, and it creates loyalty, and it tends to build a strong community. So in other words, design thinking allows the opportunity as we learn how to understand customer problems, to better empathize with them, and to apply good problem-solving techniques to those problems. It allows us to establish competitive differentiation in the market. And that allows us to build a loyal following of customers, and that also allows us to charge a more profitable price. A book that I've really enjoyed, entitled A More Beautiful Question by Warren Berger, and there's a picture of that on the screen and a link to that down below. So if you're interested in buying this, it's a great short little book. It's inexpensive. It's a fantastic read. You'll find yourself just wanting to keep reading it through one sitting. I get that feedback all the time from my students. In that book, Warren Berger suggests a great problem-solving technique in which we ask ourselves three very beautiful questions. And the first one is why? Why do things exist the way they are? Why does this problem exist? Why do we use this product instead of this product? Why do we need this service? The second question is what if? What if we could do this? What if we could solve that problem this way? Now that is where imagination takes place, and that's where we kind of expand on technological feasibility. We look at what exists now, what can be recombined and used in new ways. We also look at what could be, maybe one day. And then the last thing we ask is how? How do we apply this? How do we make this happen? Another iteration of this you might have heard of is the how might we question. How might we? And these three questions in Warren Berger's book, A More Beautiful Question, align very closely to the phases of design thinking, which I'll show you in just a moment. Now, these questions inspire us to ask about why certain problems exist. What if we could imagine a different kind of future? That's the kind of the first general phase, to invent a new future. And how could that future be created? So let's get into these 5 phases of design thinking. The first one is to define the objective. What is the problem that we're trying to solve? Why does that problem exist? And what is the broad solution idea that we think we're trying to reach? And we try to express that in a statement. We are trying to solve this problem by creating a product or by creating a service or by creating a set of processes that does this. And this is where we're inventing a new future. We haven't specified what the product is or what the service is. We've just kind of expressed what kind of solution might we be looking for. But where do you get this from? Well, I mentioned you get this from reading customer reviews of your own business or competitive products and services. And what happens if you take the perspective of customers that assign something a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4? Watch for trends. What are people complaining about? Even if they're making fun of what they're complaining about, what are they making fun of? What are they complaining about in their existence? Analyze your own problems and your own failures. Analyze your own failure statistics or observe failure statistics that are mentioned in the media. You can survey your own customers. You can ask them what's really not working for them, not only at your business, but anywhere, at other businesses too, or with a particular problem they've been experiencing. You can crowdsource for problems. You can get on some social media platforms and you can ask, hey, what problems have you observed with this? You can do this on Reddit. You can do this on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, anywhere where you can get some feedback pretty well from customers like yours. So what are we doing? We're trying to define the objective. That's step number 1. Define the objective. Identify what you think the problem is, and then create what's called a problem statement. The second phase of design thinking is to empathize. In other words, you immerse yourself in the customer's perspective of the problem, how they experience the problem that you think that they are trying to solve. In order to do that, you need to be honest about your assumptions, and you need to be honest about your own biases. It's not bad to sketch those out and to write those out. I assume this. My experience in the past is this. And to be able to get those out in the open, if you're working with a team of people, maybe go around the room and just express stated assumptions and biases and talk about the struggle that you're going to have to get those out of the way in order to dream or invent a new future, to think in a way you've never thought before, and admit those barriers and try to get those barriers out of the room, try to get those barriers out of the way. In fact, give each other permission to be able to say, hey, I think you're falling back on your assumption. That's always a safe thing to do if you can create that kind of culture in your business that people are able to say, well, let's not be so quick to make an assumption about this and how the customer experiences this without immersing ourselves. You really need to become kind of an anthropologist here with your customer and immerse yourself in the problem with them. To the best of your ability, live the experience with them. Experience the problem yourself. Really unpack it and take it apart. We use here what's called the empathy map. And when we talk about the empathy map, and you may have heard about it in other contexts, we talk about what customers say, what customers do, what customers feel, what customers think. And then lastly, we add kind of the 5 senses. What do they see? What do they see and hear? And when we think about those things and we walk through that map, what do customers see when they come into our store, when they go to our website? What do they really see? What does it really look like? And to be able to ask them that, is the music that's being broadcast in your space consistent with the rest of the customer's experience, the image you're trying to convey, and the problem that you're trying to, so the solution to the problem that you're trying to solve. When we analyze those things, what are we doing? We're working out an empathy map. That's really driving us to examine the best that we can the customer's experience. So once we pay attention to what the empathy map is telling us, the information that we're recording when we're writing this data down, we're listening and we're watching our customers, then we want to step back and say, well, first of all, did we have the proper understanding of the problem in the first place? That was the first phase of design thinking. Did we get that right? Did we ask the right questions? Did we put our problem statement in the right form to drive us toward the right kind of solution? So this has a feedback loop. Phase 2 has a feedback loop to phase 1. So the third element or third phase of design thinking is ideation or ideating. That's IDEATE. Idea is the root of that word. We want to get as many ideas as possible. How has this been solved in the past? What attempts have been made? What's wrong with those attempts? We can analyze those. We can go to the internet and look at the internet. We can even look at how the internet has made fun of this problem and look at all the different ideas that have emerged over time that we could find on the internet. I always find it helpful to do an actual image search. So I type something in, some words that are associated with the problem or words that are associated with the solutions we're thinking about, and then simply click on images and look at an image search and see all the different pictorial representations that I can see. That can generate some ideas. You can engage in brainstorming. You can engage in question storming. And there's a lot of different problem-solving techniques out there. You can engage in why, what if, and how, brought up by Warren Berger. So there's a lot of different ways to think of ideas and to get them down and to write them down. And at this stage of the process, you're not really taking any of these off the table. You can express the problem or the solution in a series of different contexts. Perhaps the solution has, in your mind, 3 parts. And you can ask people to put sticky notes under each part and try to just ideate each individual part. And that could give you ideas that may be unrelated to each other, but might drive you down different modes of thinking. So however you do it, to get as many ideas down on the whiteboard or down on the note paper or down on the butcher paper or down on the Post-it notes that you can. You really want this to be kind of the free thinking. This is the heart of the what if part of Warren Berger's 3 steps: why, what if, and how. The 4th phase is prototyping. Once you think you have your hands on a pretty good idea, a pretty good solution, then at that point you want to start prototyping it. And I want to talk for just a moment about different kinds of prototyping. I like to refer to these as, first of all, the concept model, pretotyping, and prototyping. Let me talk about concept modeling first. Concept modeling is just very basic. It tends to be free. You can draw it out. You can sketch it out. You can create kind of graphic renderings of your solution. And context modeling is simply that. It helps the problem solvers, or it may even help your customer, if they look at this, to kind of get an idea of what your solution would be. Now, at this point, they can't touch it, they can't hold it, they can't weigh it, they can't smell it, but they can see a representation of what you're thinking. And from that, they may be able to give pretty good feedback. Now, the second thing I mentioned was pretotyping. Pretotyping is about being able to see and touch the concept. It tends to be much less expensive, a few dollars to create this. It may be made out of wood and cardboard and fiberboard and poster board and toothpicks and things like that that you can kind of fashion together into a representation. Now, a pretotype typically can't hold the load and it may not be fully functioning, but it's a very inexpensive physical rendering or physical representation that demonstrates the idea. It gives some basic features. It lets the customer see the solution. Again, pretty inexpensively. And then thirdly, I mentioned prototyping. Prototyping tends to involve more expensive materials, longer time to assemble. It tends to be something that shows the basic features. It can actually be used. It may not have all the colors and paint attached to it and things like that, but it is a more expensive working model. It's able to withstand the load on it, to actually show you if you've solved the problem. It allows a near full testing experience by your customer. And this is what you would use to test. It lets the customer use it, really test the solution. This tends to be a much more expensive rendering. So if you're a restaurant, you're actually plating this up, you've made an order from your supplier, you're actually putting it out there, you're running a test on the menu, things like that. These aren't just taste tests where you're putting a few samples on a plate and asking people to taste them. You're actually plating this thing up, showing a picture in your menu and prototyping this maybe for a week without signing, long-term contracts for ingredients and things like that. Pretotype asks and allows you to answer the question, would people be interested in this? Would they use it? And how would they use it? Will they continue to use it? And maybe how much would they pay for it? But a prototype reaches further and asks the question, can we actually build this in order to hold the load? And how much would it cost us to acquire these materials and mass produce it, build out a line, or fully offer this service? What do we need in order to be able to build this or offer this? How fast can we do it, and will it work? And then the last phase of design thinking is testing. And when we test something, our objective is to actually observe and record feedback. Lots and lots and lots of feedback about how the customer is experiencing this. Again, we go back to the empathy map and we watch them and we look and we observe and we listen to what customers say, what customers do, what customers are thinking, and what customers are feeling now that they are using our actual idea. And we want to perhaps think about what are they smelling, what are they seeing, what are they hearing, and how are they interacting with that? And we're writing all of that down. You don't want just data, you want insights, and that's very, very important. You want to know what worked and what didn't and why. Again, there's feedback loops from all of these steps to each other. If we test the prototype and the test doesn't get the results we want, or the feedback indicates that the customer is not satisfied, we may go back to the prototype stage, or we may go back to the ideation stage and actually ideate a little more and try to come up with different ideas instead of just changing one or two things in our prototype. So each of these phases of design thinking, as I mentioned earlier, are fluid. It's not a linear process, although at the end, we do hope that it results in actually fully launching a product or service to solve a problem and delivering that into the marketplace. So those are the 5 phases or processes, if you will, of design thinking. They can have different names depending on who's writing about them or speaking about them. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm putting some other links down below to some other helpful videos and materials and things like that that you can read. And they may apply different words to these. For example, Marty Niemeyer calls these the 5 Ps: problematizing, pinballing, probing, prototyping, and proofing. And that's all neat and clean and pretty. I like how Snake River Farms applied design thinking to solving the problem of shipping, beef products and other meat products really around the country, around North America, and knowing that they had to deal with getting fresh meats to people 3-4 days away in a feasible way. So it was desirable for people to be able to order their, for example, their Wagyu ribeyes, which are delicious. I've got a video on this coming out on another channel of mine called Grill and Garage. So if you want to, hop on over there and subscribe there, Grill and Garage. I'll put a link, if I can, down below. Snake River Farms designed a box made out of all sustainable material. It's made out of recycled material, and it can all be recycled in different ways and all be reused. None of it has to be thrown into your local dump. And it is also able to keep meats insulated and freshly shipped for 3 or 4 days. I know that because I've received some of them. It's a great example of using design thinking to solve a number of problems with a number of great outcomes, all in one particular product solution. So I encourage you, if you want to, you can go over to my other channel, Grill and Garage, and watch a video about the sustainability of Snake River Farms packaging. If that interests you, the link will be down below. I hope that this has been helpful to inspire you to think about the customer centricity of your business, how customer focused it really is. And I hope it's given you a process or a set of tools to use to help you solve some problems, to becoming even more customer centric and solve some real problems for your customers and your business. Again, if it was meaningful, like and subscribe and put some comments down below. Let me know maybe how this inspired you and how it helped you, or how you've already been doing it, or some other great examples that you've seen or that you've done yourself in your business. It's always a pleasure to help out and interact with small businesses here on Brass Horse Business Ed. Again, I'm Steve, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.